Tonight, look up. If the sky is clear where you are, the moon is somewhere above you, full or thin as a fingernail, rising over the rooftops, or already high and silver in the dark. It has done this every single night since before there were rooftops, before there were names for the months, before anyone thought to count the days at all. And for most of human history, people did not believe the moon was simply a cold stone catching the light of the sun. They believed it was governed, ordered, held to its path by something greater than itself. They believed an angel kept the course of the moon. You have heard, perhaps, the great names of the archangels. Michael, who wars against the darkness. Gabriel, who carries the messages of heaven. Raphael, who heals. These names echo through cathedrals and synagogues and the worn pages of Scripture, familiar as the faces of old friends. But there is another name, far quieter, far stranger, that sits beside theirs in the most ancient lists ever written. A name that was carved onto the war banners of a desert community more than 2,000 years ago. A name set among the 7 holy ones who stand before the throne of God. And the very same name, almost letter for letter, appears in another list entirely, a darker list, a catalogue of the fallen, a roll call of the angels who came down from heaven and taught humanity the secrets they were never meant to possess. That name is Sariel. Most people have never heard it, and those who have heard it usually know only half the story, because Sariel is one of the few figures in all of ancient angelology who seems to stand on both sides of the great divide at once. Holy and fallen, guardian and traitor, the keeper of the moon, and the one who gave the moon's secret away. Tonight, we are going to follow that name through the oldest texts that remember it, through the book of Enoch, a scripture that millions once treasured and that councils of men later set aside, through the scrolls hidden in the caves above the Dead Sea, sealed in clay and forgotten for 19 centuries, through the quiet pages of the Talmud where an angel of the same name whispers instructions to the living. And we are going to ask the question that has puzzled scholars and dreamers for a very long time. Was there one Sariel, or were there two? The prince who upheld the order of the heavens, and the watcher who broke it. And if there was only one, what does it mean that the same hand can both protect a thing and betray it? This is not a simple story. It is older than most of what we call history, and it does not resolve into a tidy lesson. But there is something in it worth sitting with in the dark. Something about light that is borrowed and not its own. Something about knowledge that heals when it is given rightly and wounds when it is stolen. Something about the thin and trembling line between the things we are meant to know and the things we reach for too soon. So, before we begin the slow descent into this forgotten name, if this kind of telling brings you stillness or wonder, a quiet like and a subscribe, help others find their way here too, into the dark and the deep, where these old stories wait. And tell us, if you would, in the comments below, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what hour has gathered around you while the moon keeps its ancient watch overhead? And now, with the night settling and the light of the moon laid soft across the world, let us open the first page. To understand Sariel, you have to begin with the name itself, because in the world that produced these texts, a name was never only a label. A name was a destiny. A name was a function. A name was, in a very real sense, a small piece of the thing it named. The name Sariel is built from 2 ancient Hebrew roots. The first is Sar. It is a word you can still find scattered through the Hebrew scriptures, and it means prince, or commander, or captain. It is the word for a chief officer of an army, for a ruler set over a province, for one who holds authority and gives orders that others obey. A Sar is not merely powerful. A Sar is entrusted. He stands between the one who commands and the ones who carry out the command. He is the channel through which a higher will becomes action in the world below. The second root is one of the most sacred syllables in all of Western religion. El, God, the Mighty One. The same ending you hear in Michael, which means, who is like God, and in Gabriel, which means, God is my strength, and in Raphael, which means, God has healed. It is the seal that marks these beings as belonging wholly to the divine. Their names do not end in themselves, they end in God. Put the two together, and you have Sariel, the Prince of God, the Commander of God. Or, in another shading of the same roots, the command of God itself, made into a being. An order from heaven given a face and a will and a place to stand. Think for a moment about what that name implies. Michael is the one who is like God, the champion. Gabriel is the strength of God, the herald. But Sariel is the command of God. He is not the message and he is not the muscle. He is the authority behind both. He is what makes a thing lawful. He is the order that holds creation in its appointed shape. You will see, as this story unfolds, why that meaning matters so much. Because the deepest tension in the whole legend of Sariel is a tension about order, about whose command is being obeyed, and whose is being broken. Now, the name does not always appear in exactly this form, and this is the first place where things grow tangled and strange. In some ancient manuscripts, the angel is called Sariel. In others, he is Suriel, or Sariel, or Sahariel. In one of the most important Greek texts, he is written as Sarakael, with an extra syllable lodged in the middle. The spellings drift, the way names always drift, when they pass through many languages and many copyists across many centuries, from Hebrew into Aramaic, into Greek, into Ethiopic. Each scribe hearing the sound a little differently, each tongue bending it to its own shape. Scholars who study these texts have spent a great deal of effort trying to decide whether all of these spellings point to one single angel wearing many masks, or whether some of them are separate beings who simply happen to share a similar sound. We will come back to that question, because it sits at the very heart of the mystery. But hold this in mind from the beginning. The instability of the name is not a flaw in the records. It is a clue. It tells us that this figure was always slightly difficult to pin down, always shifting at the edges, always half in shadow even in the brightest lists. And one of those lists is older and more concrete than almost any other reference to the archangels anywhere in the world. In the spring of 1947, in the dry cliffs along the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, a young shepherd threw a stone into the dark mouth of a cave and heard something shatter. What he had broken was a clay jar. And inside that jar, and inside the jars in the caves that were found in the years that followed, were scrolls. Hundreds of them, some whole, most in thousands of crumbling fragments, all of them written by hand and sealed away nearly 2,000 years before. Around the time a community of devout Jews lived and prayed and copied scripture in the desert settlement we now call Qumran. Among those scrolls was a document that scholars have named the War Scroll. It is a strange and thrilling text. It describes, in elaborate and almost military detail, a final cosmic war at the end of days. A war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. The sons of light are the faithful, the chosen, the army of the righteous. The sons of darkness are the wicked nations and the spiritual powers that drive them. And this war, the scroll insists, will not be fought by human armies alone. The angels of heaven will descend and fight alongside the faithful, banner beside banner, light against the dark. The War Scroll describes the banners and the shields that the army of light will carry into battle. And on the shields of the great towers, it says, the names of 4 chief angels are to be written. 4 names inscribed in order. the commanders of the heavenly host. The first name is Michael, the second is Gabriel, the third is Sariel, and the fourth is Raphael. Read that again, and let the weight of it settle. This is not a medieval list assembled by some later mystic embroidering old traditions. This is a document copied out by hand more than 2,000 years ago, sealed in a jar and buried in the rock. And in it, among the four supreme commanders of the armies of heaven, set beside Michael and Gabriel and Raphael, three of the most exalted names in all of Scripture, stands Sariel. In the imagination of these desert worshippers, Sariel was not a minor spirit. He was not a footnote. He was one of the four great captains who would lead the final charge of light against the darkness at the end of the world. His name was meant to be carried into the last battle ever fought, written where every soldier of heaven could see it. That is who Sariel was, at the very beginning of the record, a prince of God, a commander whose name belonged on the shields of the war that ends all wars. And yet the same name, or a name so close to it that the ancients themselves could not always keep them apart, was about to appear somewhere else, not on a banner of light, but in the long, sorrowful list of those who fell. Before we follow it down into the dark, though, we have to climb higher. We have to enter the great book that remembers Sariel most fully of all, and meet the company he keeps there, the seven who stand before the throne. There is a book that the early Christians read as Scripture, a book that was quoted in the New Testament itself, in the small letter of Jude near the very end of the Bible, where it speaks of the Lord coming with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment, a book that shaped how Jews and Christians alike imagined the world of the angels, the fall of the wicked spirits, and the end of all things. A book that was treasured for centuries and copied carefully and handed down with reverence. And then, slowly, in the West, it was set aside. The great councils that decided which books belonged in the Bible left it out. Copies grew scarce. In Europe, for more than 1,000 years, it was nearly lost altogether, surviving only in scattered quotations and rumors of a vanished Scripture. It was preserved whole in only one place on earth, in the mountains of Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Church had kept it as Holy Writ all along, copied in an ancient language called Ge'ez, guarded across the long silence, while the rest of the world forgot. This is the Book of Enoch. More precisely, the first and oldest of the books that bear that name, the work scholars call First Enoch. The book takes its name from a figure who appears for only a few quiet verses in the book of Genesis, Enoch, the seventh man in the line that descends from Adam. Genesis tells us almost nothing about him. It tells us that Enoch walked with God, and then it tells us something it says of no one else in all those long genealogies. It says that Enoch was not, for God took him. He did not die in the ordinary way. He walked with God, and then he was simply gone, taken up, carried away. Genesis gives us that single haunting glimpse and moves on, but the book of Enoch opens that glimpse into a vast and shimmering world. It claims to be the record of everything Enoch saw when God took him. His journeys through the heavens, his visions of the end of days, his tours of the places where the stars are kept and the dead are held and the rebellious angels are bound. And throughout these journeys, Enoch does not travel alone. He is guided by angels, holy ones who walk beside him and explain the mysteries he cannot understand on his own. In the 20th chapter of this book, Enoch pauses to do something simple and astonishing. He lists the names of the holy angels who watch. He names the great ones, one by one, and tells us what each is set over, what each one rules, what each one keeps. He names Uriel, who is set over the world and over the deep places. He names Raphael, who is set over the spirits of human beings. the great healer who tends the souls of the living. He names Raguel, who takes vengeance on the world of the lights. He names Michael, set over the best part of humankind and over the chaos that threatens it. He names Gabriel, who is over the garden of paradise and the cherubim. He names Remiel, whom God set over those who rise, the angel who watches over the resurrection of the dead. And among them, set in the very middle of that holy company, he names another. In the manuscripts he is called Sariel, that fuller spelling we met before, the one many scholars read as another form of the name Sariel. And of him the book says something quiet and profound. Sariel, it tells us, is one of the holy angels who is set over the spirits of the children of men who sin in the spirit. Stay with that line, because it is easy to read past it, and it deserves to be felt. The others are set over great and shining things: the world, the healing of souls, paradise, the resurrection. But Sariel, under this name, is set over the spirits who sin in the spirit. He is given charge over the inner failures of human beings, over the sins that have no outward shape, that leave no mark on the body, that no one else can see, the sin of the heart, the sin of the will, the sin that happens in the silence inside a person, where only that person and God can go. What kind of office is that? It is the office of one who watches the boundary between the soul and its own darkness. Among the 7 great angels, while Michael guards humanity from the chaos without, Sariel is set to watch the chaos within. He is the prince, placed at the threshold of the human spirit, where the gravest rebellions begin. Not in battle, not in the heavens, but in the quiet turning of a will away from the light. There is something almost unbearably fitting about that. We will see, before this story ends, that Sariel's whole legend circles around the question of inward turning. The moment a thing meant to serve the order of heaven turns, in the privacy of its own will, to a purpose of its own. The sin that happens in the spirit before it ever shows itself in the world. Of all the 7, it is Sariel who is given charge of exactly that. So here is the second portrait, and it deepens the first. In the War Scroll, Sariel is a commander of the final battle. In the book of Enoch, he is one of the 7 holy archangels who stand before the throne of God, and his particular charge is the most intimate and most dangerous region in all creation, the inner life of the human soul. This is a being of the highest rank and the most delicate trust, not a warrior only, but a watchman of the heart. And now you can begin to feel the shock of what is coming, because to understand how strange it is that this same name should also appear among the fallen, you first have to understand the world that the fallen broke. You have to understand the great machine of light that the angels were set to keep, the sun and the moon in their gates, the stars in their courses, the order of the heavens that held the whole world in its appointed rhythm. You have to understand the architecture of heaven's light. And in the book of Enoch, there is an entire section devoted to exactly that. A guided tour of the cosmos, a map of the gates, through which the sun and the moon rise and set. And it is here, in this glittering machinery of days and seasons, that we will finally find the moon. The moon that Sariel, in his other and darker form, is said to have given away. Imagine that you are Enoch. You have walked with God, and God has taken you, and now you are being carried through the heavens by an angel who has been given charge of all the lights of the sky. In the book of Enoch, this angel is named Uriel, whose name means the light of God, or the fire of God, and he is described as the leader of the heavenly bodies, the one set over all the luminaries of heaven. He takes Enoch by the hand, and he begins to show him how the cosmos actually works, not as we imagine it now, with planets spinning in empty space, but as the ancients pictured it, a vast and ordered structure, a temple of light, every part of it governed and exact. There is a long section of the Book of Enoch devoted entirely to this. Scholars call it the astronomical book, or the book of the heavenly luminaries. It is one of the oldest parts of the whole work, and fragments of it were found among the scrolls at Qumran, which means that this vision of the ordered heavens was already ancient and cherished 2,000 years ago. And it is, in its strange and patient way, breathtaking. Uriel shows Enoch the gates of the sky. In this vision, the sun does not simply float across the heavens. It rises and sets through great gates set in the eastern and western horizons. There are gates in the east, through which the sun comes out in the morning, and gates in the west, through which it goes down at night. And across the year, the sun moves from one gate to the next in a fixed and unchanging pattern. In the deep of winter, the sun rises through the gates that are far to the south, and the days are short, and the nights are long and cold. As the year turns towards summer, the sun rises through gates that move steadily northward, and the days grow long, and the light grows strong. And then it turns back again, gate by gate, down toward winter, in a rhythm that never breaks and never errs. This is how the ancients understood the seasons, not as an accident of an axis tilted in space, but as the disciplined march of the sun through the gates of heaven, each gate appointed, each transition timed, the whole vast motion held in perfect order by the command of God and watched over by his angels. And then Uriel shows Enoch the moon. The moon, in this vision, also rises and sets through the gates. But the moon is more complicated than the sun, and the book lingers over it with a kind of fascinated care. For the moon does not shine with a steady, equal light the way the sun does. The moon waxes and wanes. It grows and it shrinks. Some nights it is a full and brilliant disk, flooding the world with silver. Other nights it is a thin, curved sliver, barely there. And on certain nights it vanishes entirely, leaving the sky to the stars. The Book of Enoch describes this changing light in painstaking detail. It counts the portions of light that the moon gains each night as it grows, and the portions it loses each night as it fades. It tracks how the moon, unlike the sun, falls behind and runs ahead, how its months do not line up neatly with the sun's year, how it must be reckoned with care and watched with precision. The book is, in part, an argument about time itself, about how the days should be counted, and the months measured, and the festivals fixed. This matters more than it may seem, because, in the ancient world, the moon was not merely a beautiful thing hanging in the dark. The moon was the great clock of heaven. The moon was how human beings measured time. Think about it. The very word month comes from the word moon. A month, in nearly every ancient culture, was one cycle of the moon, from new to full and back to dark again. The festivals of ancient Israel were tied to the moon. The new moon was marked and announced. The great feasts fell on appointed days reckoned by the moon's passage. To know the course of the moon was to know when to plant and when to harvest, when to celebrate and when to mourn, when the sacred days arrived and when the ordinary days returned. The moon was the keeper of appointed times. And here a deep and ancient argument hides inside the Book of Enoch. The book insists, again and again, on a particular way of counting the days. It champions a calendar of 364 days, a perfectly ordered year that divides evenly into weeks, so that every festival falls on the same day of the week, year after year, in flawless and unbroken rhythm. This was the calendar of the Qumran community, the people who hid the scrolls. And it stood in tension with the calendar most other Jews used, which followed the moon and required constant adjustment, the addition of extra days and even extra months, to keep the lunar count and the solar year from drifting apart. To us, this might sound like a dry dispute among ancient bookkeepers, but to the people who wrote and read these texts, it was a matter of cosmic importance. To keep the wrong calendar was to celebrate the holy days on the wrong days, to stand before God out of step with the order of heaven, to break, in the most fundamental way, the rhythm that God had built into creation. The right counting of time was nothing less than faithfulness to the structure of the universe. So the moon sat at the center of one of the most charged questions in the whole ancient religious world. The moon governed time, the counting of the moon governed the calendar, and the calendar governed whether a person stood in harmony with heaven or out of step with it. Now hold that thought and feel how the pieces begin to lock together. In the astronomical book, Uriel reveals all of this to Enoch as holy wisdom, the gates of the sun, the portions of the moon's light, the reckoning of the days and the months and the years. This knowledge is sacred. It is given by a holy angel to a righteous man so that the people of God may keep the true order of time and live in harmony with the heavens. The knowledge of the moon's course, given rightly, from heaven to a worthy receiver, is a gift. It is light upon light. But what happens when that same knowledge is taken? When it is not given from above to the worthy, but seized from below by the unworthy? When the secret of the moon's course is carried down out of heaven, not as a gift to the faithful, but as a stolen thing, taught to ordinary men by an angel who has abandoned his post, that is the catastrophe at the heart of the book of Enoch. And it is there, in the catalogue of the secrets that the fallen angels stole and taught, that we finally meet the other Sariel, the one who is said to have taught humanity the course of the moon, not from heaven, not as a gift, but as part of the great betrayal that, the book says, very nearly drowned the world. There is a passage near the beginning of the book of Enoch that reads like an indictment, like the reading of charges before a court. It comes after the book has told us that certain angels, called the Watchers, came down to the earth and broke the boundary between heaven and humankind. And it lists, name by name and crime by crime, what each of these fallen ones taught to the daughters of men. The list is chilling in its specificity. One of them taught the making of weapons of war, swords and shields and breastplates, the instruments by which men kill one another. One taught the working of metals out of the ground, and the cutting of jewels, and the use of antimony to paint the eyes, and all the arts of adornment and vanity. One taught enchantments, the casting of spells. One taught the cutting of roots, the secret uses of plants. One taught the loosing of enchantments, the breaking of spells. And then the book turns to the sky and lists the angels who gave away the secrets of the heaven. One of the Watchers, the book says, taught the people astrology, the reading of the stars for omens. One taught them the knowledge of the constellations, the patterns and groupings of the lights. One taught the knowledge of the clouds, the reading of the weather. One taught the signs of the earth. One taught the signs of the sun. And then comes the line we have been traveling toward through all these pages. And Sariel, the book says, taught the course of the moon. There it is, plain and stark, set among the crimes of the fallen. The course of the moon. The very same knowledge that, in the astronomical book, the holy angel Uriel reveals to Enoch as sacred wisdom. Here it appears again, but transformed utterly by who is teaching it and how. Not given from heaven to the worthy, but carried down by a rebel and handed to ordinary men who were never meant to hold it. Feel the strangeness of this. The knowledge is the same. The course of the moon is the course of the moon, whether Uriel teaches it or Sariel does. The motion of the moon through its gates, the counting of its waxing and its waning, the reckoning of the months and the festivals. This is not forbidden knowledge in itself. It is, in the right hands and from the right source, holy knowledge. It is the knowledge that lets the people of God keep faithful time. What makes it a crime in the book of Enoch is not the content, it is the theft. It is the breaking of the boundary. It is the descent of a thing from the place where it belonged to a place where it did not. The same water that gives life when it stays within its banks brings ruin when it bursts them. The same fire that warms the hearth burns down the house when it escapes the grate. And the same knowledge of the moon that orders the worship of heaven becomes a danger when it is torn out of heaven and scattered among people who will use it, the book implies, for their own ends, for omen and divination, for power, for the manipulation of time and tide and season, not in obedience to God, but in pursuit of their own desires. This is the great theme that runs beneath the entire book of Enoch, and it is one of the most piercing ideas in all of ancient thought. Knowledge is not neutral. Knowledge has a home. There are things meant to be revealed in their time, from above to those prepared to receive them. And there is a way of grasping at those same things too soon, from below, by force or by theft, that turns the gift into a wound. The tree in the Garden of Eden bore the knowledge of good and evil, and the knowledge itself was not evil. The catastrophe was in the reaching, in taking what was not yet given, in seizing from below what was meant to descend from above. The watchers in the book of Enoch are the second great reaching. After Adam and Eve reached for the fruit, the watchers reached for the earth, and they brought down with them all the secrets of heaven. The making of weapons, the arts of sorcery, the reading of the stars, and the course of the moon. Each gift, given wrongly, became a seed of ruin, and the book is unflinching about what grew from those seeds. Bloodshed, corruption, a world so twisted out of its proper shape that, in the end, heaven decided it had to be washed clean. And so we have to ask the question that any thoughtful reader of these texts has always had to ask. How can it be that Sariel, this exalted name, this commander on the war banners of light, this holy one set over the secret sins of the human heart, should also be named here, among the fallen, as the angel who gave away the moon? Is this the same Sariel? Did the great prince fall? Or is this a different being entirely? A watcher who happened to bear a name almost identical to that of the archangel, so that across the centuries the two became hopelessly entangled, the holy and the fallen blurred into a single haunting figure? That question has no certain answer, and we will turn to it directly very soon. But before we can weigh it, we have to understand the whole story of the descent. We have to understand what the watchers were, and why they came down, and what their coming did to the world, because the teaching of the moon's course was not an isolated act. It was one thread in a vast and tragic tapestry, and only when you see the whole of it can you feel the true weight of finding Sariel's name woven into it. So, let us go back to the beginning of the fall, to a mountain, to an oath, to 200 angels gazing down at the earth and at the women who walked upon it, and to the moment they decided to come down. The book of Enoch tells the story in language that is at once simple and immense. In those days, it says, when the children of men had multiplied, beautiful daughters were born to them, and the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. These angels are called the Watchers, a name that means exactly what it says. They were watchers, sentinels, beings whose appointed task, it seems, was to observe the world below, to keep watch over the affairs of the earth, to stand at the boundary between the heavens and the world of human beings, and to guard it. But a watchman who gazes too long at what he is set to guard can come to want it. And these watchers, gazing down from their high and lonely posts at the beauty of the human world, came to want it with a desire that consumed them. Their leader was an angel. The book calls Semjaza, sometimes spelled Shemihaza, a chief among the watchers. And he said to the others, "In a moment that the book renders with terrible quietness, I fear that you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." The others answered him. They swore an oath together. "Let us all bind ourselves by a curse," they said, "that none of us will turn back from this plan until we have accomplished it." And so they bound themselves to one another, 200 of them, swearing on a mountain that they would descend together and not turn back. The mountain has a name. The book calls it Mount Hermon, and it says the angels named it so because they descended upon it and bound themselves there by an oath. Mount Hermon is a real mountain. It still stands today, on the northern edge of the land of Israel. Its summit, white with snow for much of the year, a vast and brooding presence on the horizon. And in the imagination of these ancient texts, it is the place where heaven first broke its covenant with order, the threshold across which the forbidden descent began. The number is worth pausing on. 200. Not a handful of rogue spirits, but a host, an organized company, sworn and disciplined, descending together by agreement. The book even names their leaders, the chiefs of tens, the captains of the rebellion, a roll call of names that has echoed through occult and religious imagination ever since. Among them is Azazel, who would become one of the most notorious of all the fallen, the one who taught the making of weapons and the secrets of metal and the arts that lead to bloodshed and vanity. And among them, in the catalogue of teachings, as we have seen, stands the name Sariel, teaching the course of the moon. They came down. They took human women as wives. And in doing so, they shattered something that the book treats as one of the deepest laws of creation: the boundary between the heavenly and the earthly, the distinction between the spirit and the flesh. The Watchers were spirits, eternal beings made for the heavens, and they were never meant to join themselves to mortal flesh or to plant the seed of heaven in the soil of earth. To cross that boundary was not merely a moral failure, it was a violation of the order of being itself, a tearing of the fabric of how the world was made. And from that tearing came monsters. The book says that the women bore children to the Watchers, and the children were not like ordinary children. They were giants, beings of enormous size and terrible appetite. The book of Enoch describes their hunger in images that are hard to forget. They consumed everything the labor of men could produce, and when that was not enough, they turned upon humankind and devoured them. And when even that was not enough, they turned upon the beasts, and the birds, and the fish, and the very ground, until the earth itself cried out under the weight of their violence and corruption. These giants are the Nephilim, a word that appears in the book of Genesis itself, in a famously mysterious passage that says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, the mighty men of old, the men of renown. Genesis gives us only that single haunting fragment, that flash of memory of a vanished and monstrous age. The book of Enoch takes that fragment and unfolds it into a full and sorrowful account of how the world was overrun, how the order of creation was undone from the inside, how the gift of heaven, given wrongly and against the law of being, gave birth to ruin. And here, the teaching of the secrets enters the story, not as a side note, but as part of the engine of the catastrophe. The Watchers did not only corrupt the bloodline of humanity, they corrupted its knowledge. They poured into the human world a flood of forbidden arts, the making of war, the casting of spells, the cutting of roots and the working of enchantments, the reading of the stars and the clouds and the signs of the earth, and the course of the moon. Why does the book bind these two crimes together, the crossing of the boundary and the teaching of the secrets? Because they are, in the end, the same crime in two forms. Both are the seizing of what belongs above and the dragging of it below. The watchers took the bodies of women, which were not theirs to take, and they took the secrets of heaven, which were not theirs to give. In both, the order of things was inverted. What should have stayed in heaven came down. What should have remained hidden was revealed too soon, to the wrong people, for the wrong ends, and the world could not bear the inversion. It buckled, it groaned, it filled with blood, and the cry of the earth rose up to heaven. This is one of the most moving turns in the whole book. As the giants devour the world and the Watcher's secrets spread corruption everywhere, the suffering of humankind rises as a cry. The dying cry out. The earth itself cries out, the book says, accusing the lawless ones before the throne of God. And in heaven, the holy angels hear it. Michael and Uriel and Raphael and Gabriel, the great archangels, look down from the sanctuary of heaven upon all the blood that is being shed and all the wickedness that is being done, and they bring the cry of the dying before the Most High. And God answers. The book describes how the Most High sends the holy archangels down to set things right. One is sent to warn the one righteous man, Noah, of the flood that is coming, so that a remnant of the world may be saved. One is sent to bind Azazel, and to cast him into darkness beneath the earth, into a pit in the wilderness, there to await the final judgment. One is sent against the giants, to set them against one another so that they destroy themselves. And one, Michael, is sent to bind Semjaza and his companions, the chiefs of the fall, and to imprison them beneath the hills for 70 generations, until the day of their judgment at the end of all things. And here, in the dispatching of the archangels, the manuscripts begin to disagree in a way that turns out to be the very key to our mystery. For in some versions of the text, the angel sent to warn Noah of the flood is Uriel. But in others, in some of the oldest fragments of all, the angel sent to Noah is not Uriel. He is Sariel. So now, hold the whole picture together, all of it at once, and feel how it refuses to resolve. There is a Sariel on the war banners of light, one of the 4 great commanders of the final battle. There is a Sariel, or Sarakiel, among the 7 holy archangels, set over the secret sins of the human heart. There is a Sariel sent by God as one of the agents of judgment, dispatched to rescue Noah from the flood. And there is a Sariel in the catalogue of the fallen, named among the watchers who broke the boundary and taught the course of the moon, holy commander, holy watchman, holy rescuer, and fallen teacher. How can one name carry all of this? Is it one being or many? And if it is one, what does it mean? But before we can weigh the puzzle of the name, we have to sit for a while with the ones he is numbered among in that dark list. We have to understand what the watchers were beneath their crimes, what they wanted, and what became of them in the end. Because only when you have felt the full weight of their longing and their ruin can you feel how strange and how sorrowful it is to find a holy name written among them. It would be easy to read the story of the Watchers as a simple tale of villains, wicked spirits who did a wicked thing and were justly punished. But the book of Enoch does not let us off so easily, and neither should we, for the Watchers are not painted as monsters who delighted in evil. They are painted as something far more disquieting and far more familiar. They are painted as beings who wanted something, who longed, who reached across a boundary because of a desire they could not master. And there is a sorrow in their story that the book never lets us forget. Think about what a watcher actually was. A sentinel set on the high battlements of heaven, gazing down at the world of human beings, day after day, age after age, watching. And what did they watch? They watched a world utterly unlike their own. The watchers were spirits, eternal, unchanging, made of light and not of flesh. They did not hunger, they did not age, they did not love and lose and bury their dead. They did not feel the warmth of a fire on a cold night, or the weight of a child in their arms, or the brief and aching sweetness of a thing that will not last. They were immortal, and they were, in a strange way, untouched. Outside the great drama of mortal life, looking in, and below them, in the world they watched, there was all of that. Warmth, hunger, love, the fragile beauty of things that fade. The book of Enoch says that the watchers saw the daughters of men and that they were beautiful, and the word it uses for what followed is the word for desire. They wanted. They wanted the warmth they could only watch. They wanted to cross over from the cold eternity of the battlements into the brief burning world below. They wanted, perhaps, to feel what it is to be mortal and alive and held. There is a terrible poignancy in that, if you let yourself feel it. The longing of the one who watches and cannot touch. The ache of the immortal for the mortal, of the deathless for the warmth of dying things. The watchers were not seized by a lust for cruelty. They were seized by a longing for life. For the very things that we, who have them, so often fail to treasure. And that longing, in itself, was not evil. The evil was in what they did with it, in the choosing to seize what they longed for, by force, across a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. For here is the heart of it. The boundary the watchers broke was not an arbitrary rule. It was the line that kept two kinds of being in their proper natures, heaven and earth, spirit and flesh, the eternal and the mortal. These were not meant to mix. Not because mixing is forbidden by some heavenly whim, but because the mixing of them produces something that fits in neither world. The giants, the Nephilim, the children of that forbidden union were exactly that, beings that belonged nowhere, too vast for the earth, cut off from heaven, with the appetites of the flesh and a portion of the power of spirits, and no place in all creation that was rightly theirs. They were the living proof that the boundary had been built for a reason. Cross it, and you do not gain the warmth you longed for. You produce a thing that cannot be at peace anywhere. And notice the chief, Semjaza, and the words the book gives him on the mountain before the descent. I fear, he says, that you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. He knew. Before the first step downward, the leader of the watchers already knew that what they were about to do was a great sin, and that there would be a penalty to pay. He did not stumble into ruin in ignorance. He walked into it with his eyes open, afraid, and the others bound themselves to one another with an oath precisely so that none could turn back, precisely because they all sensed that, alone, each of them might lose his nerve and retreat from the edge. They made the oath a chain. They bound themselves to the deed so that the longing would not be overruled by the fear, so that desire would carry them across the line that wisdom told them not to cross. How human that is! How exactly like the way a person talks themselves into the thing they know they should not do, the binding of oneself to a course so as not to turn back, the recruiting of others so as not to be alone in the fall, the drowning of the small warning voice beneath the weight of a desire that has already decided. The watchers fell the way people fall, not in a sudden alien madness, but in a slow, deliberate, frightened reaching for a warmth they were not meant to grasp. And this is why their story has haunted the human imagination for thousands of years, because we recognize them. We have stood on our own small battlements, longing for what we could only watch. We have known the ache of reaching for a thing across a line we knew was a line. The watchers are not a warning about strange spirits in the ancient sky. They are a mirror held up to the oldest temptation in the human heart, the temptation to seize rather than to receive. to grasp the borrowed light, to cross the boundary, because the longing is louder than the wisdom. And it is into this company, the company of these longing, fallen, tragic sentinels, that the name Sariel is written beside the teaching of the moon's course. Whatever else it means that the keeper of the moon stands somehow near the deepest and most human of all falls, which makes the question of his fate and the fate of all the watchers more urgent still. What happened to them? After the longing and the crossing and the ruin, the book does not leave that question unanswered. But the answer is heavy, and it is sorrowful, and it teaches its own hard truth about the things that cannot be undone. The book of Enoch tells us, in unsparing detail, what became of the watchers and what they had made. And it is not a story of mercy, it is a story of consequence, of an order that cannot simply absorb the breaking of it, but must answer and set right and bind. When the cry of the suffering earth rose up to heaven, and the holy archangels brought it before the throne of God, the Most High sent his agents down to deal with the catastrophe one piece at a time. And the book describes their commissions with a kind of solemn precision, like sentences read out in a court that does not flinch. Azazel, the one who had taught the making of weapons and the working of metal and the arts of corruption, was given the heaviest binding. An archangel was sent to bind him hand and foot, the book says, and to cast him into the darkness, to make an opening in the wilderness, in a desert place, and to throw him into it, and to lay upon him rough and jagged rocks, and to cover him with darkness, so that he should dwell there, unseen, until the great day of judgment at the end of the world, when he would be cast into the fire forever. And the book says that the whole earth had been corrupted through the works that Azazel taught, and that to him the whole of the corruption was to be ascribed. He who reached across the boundary to teach the secrets was buried beneath the rocks of the desert, in the dark, to wait. Semjaza and the other chiefs of the rebellion, the leaders who had sworn the oath on the mountain, were bound as well. An archangel, the book says, was sent to bind them beneath the hills of the earth for 70 generations, until the day of their judgment, until the end of all the generations of the world. 70 generations in the dark beneath the hills, not destroyed, for they were spirits and could not simply die, but bound, imprisoned, held in the long darkness, waiting for a judgment that would not come until the very end of time. Their immortality, which had once seemed a kind of crown, became a kind of curse. For a mortal, imprisonment ends with death. For a deathless one, the binding stretches on across the generations, world without end, with only the final judgment at the close of everything to look toward. And the giants, the Nephilim, the children of the forbidden union, were set against one another. The book says that they fell upon each other in slaughter until they had destroyed themselves, the parents made to watch as their monstrous children perished in mutual ruin. It is one of the most sorrowful images in the whole book. The fallen watchers, who had crossed the boundary out of longing for the warmth of life, made to behold the destruction of the very children that longing had produced. The longing for life ending in the witnessing of death. The reaching for warmth ending in the cold of total loss. But the book tells us something stranger and darker still about the giants, and it is one of the most influential ideas in the entire history of religious thought. When the bodies of the giants died, the book says, their spirits did not simply vanish. The giants were a mixture, born of spirit and flesh, and when the flesh perished, the spirit remained, homeless, belonging to neither heaven nor the grave. And these homeless spirits of the dead giants, the book says, became the evil spirits that wander the earth, the demons, the unclean spirits that afflict and oppress and tempt and destroy the children of men, that find no rest, that hunger for what they can never again possess. According to the book of Enoch, this is where demons come from, not from a separate creation of evil, but from the ruin of the boundary crossing. The demons are the leftover spirits of the giants, the residue of the fall, the homeless hunger that the breaking of the boundary set loose upon the world. Feel how that closes the circle. The watchers longed for the warmth of mortal life and crossed the boundary to seize it. From that crossing came the giants, who belonged nowhere. And from the death of the giants came the demons, the homeless spirits who wander still, who can never be at peace, who hunger forever for a home they will never have. The whole tragedy ripples outward into a permanent wound in the world, a wound that the ancients believed they could still feel in every temptation and every affliction and every restless evil that troubles a human life. The fall of the Watchers was not a private sin with a private punishment. It tore the world, and the tear, the book says, is with us still. And then there is the most heartbreaking detail of all. The book tells us that the Watchers, once they saw what they had done and what was coming, were afraid, and they begged Enoch, the righteous man who walked with God, to write a petition for them, to plead their case before heaven, to ask for forgiveness, for relief, for some mercy in the face of the judgment that loomed. And Enoch wrote it. He wrote out their petition and carried it, in his vision, before the throne. And the answer came back. The answer was that there would be no peace for them. The petition was denied. The Watchers, who had once dwelt in heaven, would never return to it. They had asked for mercy, and the word that came down to them was that they should have interceded for human beings, not human beings for them, that they had abandoned the high and holy heaven and lain with the daughters of earth, and that for them there would be no forgiveness and no peace, not now and not ever. It is a hard saying, the hardest in the book, not because heaven is cruel, but because some things, once done, cannot be undone. Some boundaries, once broken, cannot be unbroken. The Watchers reached across the line, and the reaching could not be taken back, and the warmth they had grasped at turned to ash in their hands, and the answer to their plea was the silence of a door that had closed. There would be no peace for them, and it is here, against this darkness, that the holy archangels shine most clearly, for they are the ones sent to bind the fall and to bring the cry of the suffering to the throne. They are the agents of the order that the Watchers broke, the keepers of the boundary that the Watchers crossed. And if Sariel, in his holy form, is numbered among them, then he stands not with the longing that grasps, but with the order that keeps. Not with the breaking, but with the binding and the setting right. To understand that holy company fully, and to feel the full strangeness of finding his name on both sides of the divide, we have to look once more and more closely at the seven who stand before God, the seven who do not grasp but reflect, the seven who carry the prayers of the faithful up into the presence of the glory. There is a number that runs through the whole of the sacred imagination of the ancient world, and that number is 7. 7 days of creation, 7 days in the week, the 7th day of rest, 7 branches on the golden lampstand that burned in the holy place. 7, again and again, marking the things that are complete, whole, finished, perfect. In the ancient mind, 7 was the number of completeness, the number that signified a thing brought to its full and proper measure. And so, it is no accident that, when the traditions counted the highest angels who stand in the immediate presence of God, they so often counted 7 of them, the 7 holy ones, the complete and perfect company of the great archangels who serve closest to the throne. The Book of Enoch gives us those 7 by name, and Sariel, under the form Sariel, is among them, as we have seen. But the idea of the 7 holy angels is not unique to Enoch. It appears in another ancient book as well, a book that found its way into many Bibles and is still read as scripture by a great many Christians around the world, the Book of Tobit. In the book of Tobit, there is a beautiful and tender story in which an angel travels in disguise alongside a young man on a long journey, protecting him, guiding him, healing his blind father at the end. And only at the close of the story does the angel reveal who he truly is. "I am Raphael," he says, "one of the 7 holy angels who present the prayers of the saints and who enter into the presence of the glory of the Holy One." One of the 7 holy angels, there it is again, that complete and perfect number, the 7 who stand in the presence of the glory. And notice what the angel says they do. They present the prayers of the saints. They carry the prayers of human beings up into the presence of God. What a gentle and astonishing image of what these beings are for. The 7 who stand before the throne are not only warriors and watchmen and agents of judgment, they are couriers of prayer. They gather up the words and the longings and the cries of human hearts, the prayers whispered in the dark, the prayers too broken to be spoken aloud, and they carry them up into the presence of the glory, before the face of God. They are the bridge between the prayer below and the throne above. And Sariel, if he is among them, is one of those who carry the prayers, one of the 7 who gather the longings of the earth and bear them up into the light. And this same image surfaces yet again in the very last book of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, where the seer beholds the throne of God and the worship of heaven. He sees, he writes, the 7 angels who stand before God. The 7 who stand before God, the complete company in the immediate presence, just as in Tobit, just as in Enoch. And in the vision, these 7 angels are bound up with the prayers of the holy ones rising before the throne like incense, the smoke of the prayers ascending into the presence of God. Once more the 7 and the prayers together, the complete company of the great archangels standing in the light, carrying the longings of the faithful up into the glory. So now consider where this places Sariel in his holy form against the dark backdrop we have just walked through. The watchers reached upward by grasping downward. They tried to seize the warmth of earth and drag it across the boundary, and their reaching tore the world and could not be undone. And the answer to their plea was that there would be no peace for them. But the 7 holy ones do the opposite. They do not grasp the things of earth and pull them down. They gather the prayers of earth and carry them up. They are the very channel that the watchers refuse to be. The watchers were told that they should have interceded for human beings, and they did not. But the 7 holy ones are nothing but intercessors. They are the ones who carry the human cry into the presence of God. They are what the watchers were meant to be and would not be. Do you see the shape of it now? The whole drama turns on a single difference. The difference between grasping downward and carrying upward. Between seizing what is below and bearing it up into the light. The watchers fell by reaching down to take. The holy ones stand by reaching down only to gather, and then lifting what they gather up to God. The same motion toward the earth, but in one it is a seizing, and in the other it is a service. In one it is theft, and in the other it is intercession. In one the borrowed light is grasped as a possession, and in the other it is reflected faithfully, gathered and carried and given back to the source from which it came. And this is precisely why it is so haunting, so unbearably strange, to find the name Sariel on both sides of that divide. For here is a name that belongs, in its holy form, to the 7 who carry the prayers up into the glory. The prince, whose very name means the command of God, one of the complete and perfect company that stands in the immediate presence, that gathers the longings of the faithful and bears them into the light. And the same name, or one so close to it, that the ancients could not always keep them apart, appears among those who reached the other way, who grasped instead of carrying, who seized the borrowed light instead of reflecting it. That single name, stretched across the whole distance between the carrying and the grasping, between the intercession and the theft, between the 7 who stand and the watchers who fell, holds within it the entire drama of every created soul. The choice that faces everything that shines with a borrowed light, to carry or to grasp, to reflect or to seize, to stand before the throne or to fall beneath the hills. And now, at last, with the full weight of both the height and the depth before us, we can return to the puzzle we set aside, the puzzle of the name itself. 1 Sariel, or 2, the prince who carried the prayers and the watcher who gave the moon away. Here is where we must slow down and speak carefully, because this is the place where honest study has to admit what it does not know. There are, broadly, 3 ways that scholars and ancient readers have tried to make sense of the puzzle of Sariel, and each of them is illuminating in its own way, and none of them can be proven beyond doubt. Let us walk through them slowly, the way you would turn a strange and beautiful object in your hands, looking at it from every side. The first possibility is the simplest. There were 2 different angels who merely shared a similar name. One was Sariel, the holy archangel, exalted and faithful, a commander of heaven. The other was a watcher whose name, in the long chain of copying and translation from one language to another, came to be written almost identically. According to this view, the ancient texts are not telling us that a holy archangel fell. They are simply preserving 2 separate figures whose names converged on the page, the way 2 different people in the world today might share a single common name without being in any way the same person. There is real support for this view, because the names in these texts are genuinely unstable. As we have seen, the figure appears as Sariel, Suriel, Sarakael, Sariel, and more, drifting across Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek and Ge'ez. It is entirely possible that one ancient tradition knew a holy angel by one form of the name, and another tradition knew a fallen watcher by another form, and that only later, as the texts were gathered and compared, did the 2 seem to merge. On this reading, there is no tragedy of a fallen prince. There are simply 2 beings and a coincidence of sound and centuries of confusion. The second possibility is more unsettling, and some have indeed entertained it, that there was one Sariel, a great angel, who fell, that the prince who once stood among the Holy 7 was among those who descended upon Mount Hermon, who swore the oath, who crossed the boundary, who gave away the course of the moon. On this reading, the lists do not contradict each other so much as record a before and an after. The Holy Office and the Great Fall, both true, separated by the catastrophe of the descent. It would not be the only such story in the ancient imagination. The figure, later known as the Great Adversary, the one who became the Prince of Darkness, was also imagined in some traditions as a being of the highest light who fell from his exalted place. The fall of a great one from glory is among the oldest and most powerful patterns in all of religious thought. But here we must be careful and honest, because this second reading is not what the book of Enoch itself plainly teaches. The book lists Sariel, or Sarakael, among the holy angels in one chapter, and it lists a Sariel among the fallen in another, and it does not stop to tell us that these are the same being, or that one became the other. The idea that the holy Sariel fell is an inference, a story we might build to connect the lists, not a claim the text makes outright. It is the kind of haunting possibility that the gaps in an ancient book invite us to imagine. But imagination is not the same as evidence, and a careful reader holds the difference clearly in mind. The third possibility is, in many ways, the most profound, and it is the one that recent study has tended to favor most strongly. It concerns those manuscript variants we keep returning to, the places where the oldest fragments read Sariel, exactly where the later Ethiopic text reads Uriel. Recall what we found in the dispatching of the archangels, where the familiar text says, God sent Uriel to warn Noah of the flood. Some of the most ancient witnesses say, God sent Sariel. And in the four great archangels who look down from heaven and hear the cry of the dying, where one tradition lists Uriel, another lists Sariel in his place. Over and over, in the earliest layers of the text, Sariel appears precisely where the later tradition would put Uriel, as if, at the very beginning, Sariel and Uriel were almost interchangeable, as if the role that one tradition gave to the angel of light, another tradition gave to the Prince of God. What this suggests is something subtle and remarkable. It suggests that Sariel was, from the very earliest period, one of the four supreme archangels, ranked beside Michael and Gabriel and Raphael, exactly as the War Scroll has him. And it suggests that the place he held in the foursome was, in some traditions, later given over to Uriel, so that as the centuries passed, Sariel's prominence faded and Uriel's grew, and Sariel slipped from the front rank of the great archangels into the second rank, remembered but no longer central. A prince who was once among the highest four, slowly eclipsed, slowly moved to the margins of memory, until in much later angelology he became a relatively obscure figure, half forgotten, while the names of Michael and Gabriel and Raphael shone on. And if that is so, then there is a quiet poetry in it that the moon itself seems to echo. For Sariel is the angel of the moon, and the moon is the very image of a light that waxes and wanes, that rises to fullness and then fades, that is bright in one age and dim in another, never extinguished but always changing. Sariel's place among the archangels seems to have done exactly what the moon does. It waxed, in the earliest traditions, to the front rank, named on the war banners, and sent on the gravest missions. And then it waned, eclipsed by other names, slipping toward the edge of the sky of memory. The angel of the moon was himself a kind of moon, rising and setting in the imagination of the ages. Now, what do we do with the fallen Sariel, the watcher who taught the moon's course, in light of all this? The most likely answer, the one that does the least violence to the texts and the most justice to the strangeness, is this. The teaching of the moon's course was given to a figure called Sariel in the catalogue of the Watchers because of who Sariel already was. He was the angel associated, in the oldest traditions, with the moon, just as Uriel was associated with the lights of heaven and the order of the cosmos. When the book imagined the secrets of heaven being stolen and taught below, it naturally assigned each secret to the angel who governed it above, the signs of the sun to the angel of the sun, the course of the moon to the angel of the moon, and the angel of the moon, in this old tradition, was Sariel. So the appearance of Sariel's name among the fallen may not mean that the Holy Prince personally descended and sinned. It may mean something stranger and sadder, that the knowledge which was Sariel's holy charge, the knowledge of the moon, was the very knowledge that the rebellion seized and dragged down into the world, that his domain was robbed, that the thing he was set to guard was stolen and given to humankind, so that his name became attached to the crime not because he committed it, but because it was his treasure that was plundered. We cannot know which of these readings is true. The texts will not finally tell us, and anyone who claims complete certainty here has gone beyond what the evidence allows. But notice that all three readings, however different, circle the same deep center. They are all, in the end, about a single thing: the course of the moon, and who has the right to keep it. Whether Sariel fell, or whether his name was merely borrowed for a fallen brother, or whether his treasure was stolen out of his keeping, the story is always about the moon's secret and the danger of holding it wrongly. The mystery does not dissolve, it deepens. and it points us, every time, back to the moon, and to the question of knowledge that heals and knowledge that harms. Before we follow that question to its end, though, there is one more place the name Sariel appears, a place far from the cosmic battles and the lists of the watchers. A quieter place where an angel of nearly the same name leans close to the living and speaks not of the fall of the heavens, but of healing and protection and the keeping of human life. To find the whole of Sariel, we have to listen for him there too, in the soft and human pages of later tradition, where he becomes the Prince of the Presence and the Guardian, and, in some shadows, the angel who waits at the end of every life. Leave the cosmic battles behind for a while. Set down the lists of the watchers and the catalogue of stolen secrets. There is a gentler set of texts where a name very close to Sariel appears, and it shows us a different face of this figure entirely. Not the commander on the war banner, not the rebel on Mount Hermon, but the angel who leans close to a human life and speaks softly and protects and keeps. In the great body of Jewish learning called the Talmud, vast and ancient, layer upon layer of debate and story and law, compiled over many centuries, there is a moment in the tractate on blessings where a sage records advice he was given by an angel, and the angel is named Suriel, which, as we have seen, is one of the close kin of the name Sariel, perhaps the same name in another dress. And Suriel is given a remarkable title. He is called the Prince of the Presence. Consider what that title means. The presence is the very nearness of God, the place directly before the throne, the face of the Most High into which the highest beings gaze. To be a prince of the presence is to belong to the innermost circle of heaven, to stand where the glory is undimmed, to behold what almost nothing in all creation is permitted to behold. The princes of the presence, in Jewish tradition, are the most exalted of all the angels, the ones who serve closest to God, who are not sent on errands to the far corners of the cosmos, but who remain in the immediate radiance of the divine. And so here, in this quiet rabbinic text, the figure whose name means Prince of God is given a title that places him among the very highest in the immediate presence of God. The two fit together with a kind of inevitability. The Prince of God, standing as a Prince of the Presence, the meaning of the name and the rank of the title pointing to the same exalted place. What does this exalted angel say in that ancient passage? Not thunder, not prophecy of the end of days. He gives practical, protective instruction, counsel about how to keep oneself safe, how to handle the small dangers of ordinary life, how to guard against harm. It is the speech of a guardian, a protector who cares about the small and breakable details of a human existence, the same being who, in the cosmic texts, commands the armies of light, here bends down to whisper how a person might keep from being hurt in the course of an ordinary day. This is the second great face of Sariel, and it runs through the later traditions like a quiet thread. He is a guardian, a keeper, a protector of human life and health. In various later mystical and magical traditions, in amulets and protective texts, and the lore of those who sought to ward off harm, the name Suriel or Sariel appears again and again as a guardian invoked for protection. He is called upon for healing, for safety, for defense against the unseen forces that the ancients believed pressed in upon a vulnerable human life. His name was written and worn and spoken as a shield, and in this role he stands close to Raphael, the great angel of healing, his neighbor in the list of the Holy Seven. Two princes of mercy, set near each other before the throne, both bending their power toward the mending of human beings. There is something fitting in the angel of the moon being also an angel of healing. If you think about how the ancients saw the moon governed cycles. The tides of the sea rose and fell with it. The rhythms of the body, the patterns of growth and rest, the turning of the seasons of a life, all of these were felt to move in sympathy with the moon's waxing and waning. To know the course of the moon was, in the ancient mind, to know the rhythms by which living things flourish and fade and flourish again. And the one who kept the moon's course might also keep the deeper rhythms of healing, the cycles by which a wounded body or a wounded soul is restored. The same knowledge that the watchers stole and turned to corruption could, in the hands of a faithful guardian, become the knowledge that heals. The course of the moon could be a curse or a cure, depending on the hand that held it. But there is a third face of Sariel in the later traditions, and it is the most solemn of all. For in some strands of ancient lore, the angel of this name is associated not only with the protection of life, but with its end, with the grave work of the angel who attends the dying. In certain texts, Sariel appears among those connected to death, to the gathering of souls, to the threshold a human being crosses at the last. At first, this seems to contradict everything else. How can the guardian of life also be the angel of death? But sit with it a moment in the quiet of the night, and you may feel that it does not contradict at all. The moon is the great image of this very thing. The moon dies every month. It wanes, night by night, until it vanishes entirely into darkness, gone from the sky as if it had never been. And then, after the darkness, it returns. A sliver, a curve, a growing light, until it is full again. The moon is the eternal teacher of the truth that death is not the end of the cycle, but a turning within it, that the darkness is not final, that what wanes will wax again. If Sariel is the angel of the moon, then it is fitting beyond words that he should stand at both the beginning and the end of life, at the waxing and at the waning, at the protection of the living and at the threshold of the dying. For he keeps the course of the thing that teaches more clearly than anything else in the visible heavens, that fading is followed by return, that the dark of the moon is not its death but its rest, that after the darkness the light comes back. So now we have seen the full strange company of faces that this single name has worn across the ages. The commander on the banners of the final war, the Holy One set over the secret sins of the heart, the agent of judgment sent to rescue Noah, the fallen teacher of the moon's course, the prince of the presence who whispers protection to the living, the guardian invoked for healing, and the solemn one who waits at the end of a life, warrior, watchman, rescuer, rebel, guardian, healer, and the keeper of the final threshold. What holds all of these together? What is the thread that runs through every face? It is the moon. And more than the moon, it is what the moon means: time and its keeping, the rhythm of waxing and waning, the boundary between light and darkness, and the law that governs the crossing of it, the knowledge of when, the knowledge of the appointed hour, the knowledge that orders the cycle of a life and a world. Everywhere this name appears, in every age and every tradition, it is bound to the keeping of that rhythm. And to understand the deepest meaning of Sariel, we have to understand the deepest meaning of his charge. We have to understand what it truly meant in the ancient world to keep the course of the moon. There is a verse near the very beginning of the Bible, in the first chapter of Genesis, that most people read straight past without noticing what it actually says. It comes on the fourth day of creation, when God makes the lights of the sky. And the text says that God set lights in the dome of the heavens, to separate the day from the night, and to be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. For signs and for seasons. That little phrase carries more weight than it seems. The word that is translated seasons is not, in the original Hebrew, a word about spring and summer and autumn and winter. It is a word that means appointed times, set meetings, fixed occasions. It is the very word used throughout the rest of the scriptures for the sacred festivals, the holy days, the appointed gatherings when the people of God were to come together and stand before Him. The same word for the feasts. So read the verse again with that in mind. God set the sun and the moon in the sky to mark the appointed times, the festivals, the sacred meetings between heaven and earth. According to the very first chapter of the Bible, this was a central purpose for which the lights of heaven were made, not only to give light, not only to divide day from night, but to keep the calendar of the sacred, to mark the moments when human beings were to draw near to God. And the keeper of that calendar, above all, was the moon. The sun marks the day and the year, the great slow turning of the seasons, but it is the moon that marks the month, and it was by the moon that the ancient festivals were timed. The sacred days of ancient Israel fell on appointed days reckoned by the moon. The new moon itself was a holy day, marked and announced and celebrated. The greatest of the feasts were set by counting from the new moon, falling on fixed days within the lunar month. The whole rhythm of sacred time, the breathing in and breathing out of the religious year, the cycle of feast and fast and ordinary days, all of it was governed by the moon's faithful passage through the sky. This is why the course of the moon was no small or idle knowledge. To know the course of the moon was to know when the sacred times arrived. It was to hold the key to the calendar of heaven. And whoever controlled the calendar controlled, in a very real sense, the worship of the people. They decided when the new month began, and therefore when every festival within it would fall. They decided whether the people would stand before God on the right day or the wrong one. In ancient Israel, the declaring of the new month was a solemn and serious matter. The beginning of a new month was determined by the sighting of the new moon, that first thin sliver of returning light after the dark. Witnesses would watch the western sky after sunset, and when they saw the new crescent, they would come and testify before the court, and the court would examine them. And if their testimony was sound, the new month would be declared, and the news would be sent out across the land, sometimes by signal fires lit on the hilltops, beacon answering beacon across the dark country, so that everyone would know that a new month had begun and could count toward the festivals that lay within it. Imagine that, the whole sacred calendar of a people hanging on the sighting of a thin curve of light in the darkening sky, confirmed by the testimony of watchers, announced by fires burning on the hills. The keeping of the moon's course was not abstract. It was the living, breathing heartbeat of an entire religious world. And it had to be kept exactly, because to keep it wrongly was to break the rhythm between the people and their God. Now you can feel, fully and completely, why the book of Enoch treats the moon and its reckoning with such intensity, and why it matters so much that the book champions one particular way of counting time against another. The book insists on a calendar of 364 days, a year of perfect order, dividing evenly into 52 weeks so that every date falls on the same day of the week every single year, and no festival ever drifts, and the whole structure of sacred time stands fixed and unchanging, like a great and flawless machine. This was the calendar kept by the community in the desert who hid the scrolls, the people of Qumran. To them, it was the true calendar, the heavenly calendar, the order built into creation itself. And it stood against the calendar that most of their fellow Jews followed, which was bound more closely to the moon. A lunar reckoning, in which the months follow the actual phases of the moon, and because the moon's cycle does not divide evenly into the solar year, the count must be constantly corrected, with extra days added here and there, and even whole extra months added in certain years, to keep the moon's count from sliding out of step with the seasons of the sun. To us, this sounds like a technical disagreement among ancient experts. But to those who lived it, it was a chasm. The two calendars placed the festivals on different days. They meant that one community would be celebrating the holiest day of the year, while another community just over the hills counted it an ordinary day. They meant that the question who is keeping the right time, who is standing before God on the true appointed day, became a question of profound and even bitter seriousness. The people of Qumran believed that the rest of their nation had fallen into the wrong rhythm, had lost the true count, had broken step with the order of heaven, and they kept their 364 days in the desert as an act of fierce and lonely faithfulness, holding to the calendar they believed God had built into the world from the beginning. This is the world in which the course of the moon was knowledge worth fighting over. This is why an angel was set to keep it. And this is why, when the book of Enoch imagined the secrets of heaven being stolen and dragged down to earth, the course of the moon was among the most dangerous of all the stolen things, because whoever holds the moon's course holds the calendar, and whoever holds the calendar holds the appointed times, and whoever holds the appointed times holds the very meeting place between humanity and heaven. To teach the course of the moon rightly from above was to give the people the means of faithful worship. To seize the course of the moon wrongly from below was to grasp at control over the sacred rhythm itself. To take into human hands, by theft and not by gift, the power to set the times. It was, in its way, an act of breathtaking ambition. The reaching of the creature for a thing that belongs to the order of creation. The desire to be the keeper of time, rather than to receive time as a gift and keep its appointments faithfully. And so the moon's secret turns out to be the secret of time itself, of the appointed hour, of the rhythm by which all sacred things are measured. Sariel, in keeping the course of the moon, keeps nothing less than the calendar of the meeting between earth and heaven, and that is the most sacred clock there is. Before we come to the deepest truth of all, though, it is worth pausing on the moon a little longer, and on the strange double life it has always led in the religious imagination. For the moon, in the scriptures and in the long memory of the faithful, is at once the very emblem of faithfulness and the object of one of the oldest temptations to unfaithfulness. And in that doubleness, the whole drama of Sariel is reflected once more. Return for a moment to the fourth day of creation, to the making of the lights. The first chapter of Genesis says that God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. The greater light is the sun, the lesser light is the moon. And notice the word the text chooses. The moon is the lesser light. It is openly, plainly named as the lesser. It does not rival the sun. It does not pretend to the brightness of the day. It is given the night. And it is given the night not as a lord in its own right, but as a servant set to rule a domain that has been handed to it. The lesser light appointed to govern the dark. There is a humility built into the moon from the very first day. It is not the source of the day's brilliance, and it does not pretend to be. It rules the night, but it rules it with a borrowed and gentle light, a light fit for sleep and not for labor, a light you can look at without being blinded, a light that soothes rather than scorches. The moon was made to be the lesser, and in being faithfully and contentedly the lesser, it became, for the ancient imagination, the very picture of faithfulness itself. There is a line in the book of Psalms that captures this with great beauty. In one of the Psalms, God makes a promise about the throne of the house of David, that it will endure, and the psalm reaches for the most faithful and enduring thing it can find in all the visible world to serve as the measure of that endurance. And what it reaches for is the moon. The throne, the psalm says, shall be established forever, like the moon, the faithful witness in the sky. The faithful witness, that is what the moon is called. The thing you can count on, the standard of constancy, the witness that does not fail. But here is the wonder of it, the quiet paradox that makes the moon such a deep teacher. The moon is named the faithful witness, and yet the moon is the most changeable thing in the heavens. It waxes and wanes. It grows and shrinks. It is full 1 week and gone the next. By every ordinary measure, the moon is the very opposite of constant. It never stays the same for 2 nights together. How can the most changeable light in the sky be the emblem of faithfulness? The answer is one of the most beautiful truths the night has to teach. The faithfulness of the moon is not the faithfulness of never changing. It is the faithfulness of never failing to keep its course. The moon changes, yes, but it changes in perfect order, in flawless rhythm, in a pattern so regular that you can set the calendar of a whole people by it. Its waxing comes on time. Its waning comes on time. Its fullness and its darkness arrive exactly when they are due, age after age, without fail. The moon is faithful not by standing still, but by keeping faith with its appointed rhythm through all its changing. Its constancy is the constancy of the course, not of the shape. It is faithful in its very changing. What a thing to hold on to in a life that is itself always changing. We are not asked to be faithful by never changing, by never waxing and never waning, by holding ourselves frozen and unmoved. We change. We grow bright and we grow dim. We fill and we empty. The seasons turn within us as surely as they turn in the sky. To be faithful is not to escape that. It is to keep our course through it, to keep faith with the rhythm we were given, to let the waxing be a true waxing and the waning be a true waning, and to trust that the changing itself, when it keeps its course, is a kind of faithfulness. The moon does not apologize for waning. The waning is part of its faithfulness. And so, perhaps, are the darker seasons of a faithful life. But the moon has a shadow side in the religious memory, and it is the very shadow that the keeper of the moon was set, in part, to guard against. For the moon, this faithful and lesser light, this servant of the night, became for many ancient peoples a god. All across the ancient world, the moon was worshipped. Temples were raised to it. Incense was burned to it. Whole cities gave themselves to the cult of the moon, bowing down to the silver light, calling the reflector a deity, offering their prayers and their fears and their firstfruits to the lesser light as though it were the greatest of all. And the scriptures of Israel return again and again to warn against exactly this. There is a passage in the book of Deuteronomy that speaks of it with great solemnity. "Take heed," it says, "lest you lift up your eyes to the heavens, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, you are drawn away to bow down to them and to serve them, lest you lift up your eyes and worship the lights themselves." It is a striking warning when you sit with it. The danger it names is not some exotic wickedness. It is the simplest thing in the world, looking up at the night sky, at the moon and the stars in their beauty, and being so moved by that beauty that you fall down and worship it. The danger is in stopping at the reflection, in being so captured by the borrowed light that you forget to ask where the light comes from, in mistaking the faithful witness for the one it bears witness to, in worshipping the lesser light as though it were the source. And the kings of Israel struggled with this for generations. There came a time, the scriptures record, when there were priests in the land who burned incense to the moon and to the sun and to all the host of heaven, and a great reforming king named Josiah swept them away, tearing down the worship of the lights, turning the people back from the reflection to the source. The moon, the faithful servant light, had to be cast down from the altar where it never belonged, so that it could shine again as what it was always meant to be. Not a god, a witness. Not the light, a bearer of the light. Do you see how this is the same drama once more, only turned around? The watchers grasped the borrowed light from above, acting as sources when they were only reflectors, and they fell. And human beings, looking up, grasped the borrowed light from below, calling the reflector a god, worshipping the moon instead of the one whose light it carries. In both, the error is identical. The borrowed light is mistaken for the true light. The mirror is treated as the source. The reflection is grasped and worshipped, instead of being received as a witness that points beyond itself. And this, in its way, is what the keeper of the moon truly guards. Not only the course of the moon through its gates, not only the calendar and the appointed times, but the proper place of the moon itself as a servant and a witness, a faithful and lesser light that rules the night in order to point beyond the night, that shines with a borrowed brilliance in order to turn every watching heart toward the source from which that brilliance flows. The moon was made to be looked at, and then to be looked past, to be received, and then to lead the eye upward. The faithful witness does not want your worship. It wants to point you to the one it witnesses to. So when you look at the moon tonight, let it do its faithful work. Let its beauty move you, as it has moved every human heart that ever lived. But do not stop there. Let the lesser light lead you to ask after the greater. Let the borrowed brilliance turn your face toward the source. The moon is a witness, and a witness is faithful only when it points away from itself to the truth it was made to reveal. But there is one more thing about the moon, one final and quiet truth that lies beneath everything we have said. It is the deepest meaning of all, and it is the key to the whole figure of Sariel, and to the whole tragedy of the Watchers, and to something in your own life and mine. It is this: the moon does not shine with a light of its own. Look at the moon on the next clear night, and remember what it actually is. The moon is not a source of light. It is a stone, vast and cold and dark, hanging in the void. It produces no brightness of its own, not one ray. Everything you see when you look at the moon, all that silver glory laid across the rooftops and the water, all that pale radiance that has stirred poets and lovers and frightened children for the whole of human history, is borrowed light. It is sunlight. The moon does nothing but turn its dark face toward the sun and catch what the sun pours out and reflect a little of it back into the night. The moon is a mirror. Its beauty is real, but it is not its own. It shines only because it receives. And here, at last, the whole story of Sariel gathers itself into a single point of meaning, sharp and clear and quiet as starlight. For what is an angel? In all of these ancient traditions, an angel is a created being, a made thing, glorious beyond our imagining, ranked far above us, shining with a brilliance that would overwhelm any human eye. But not the source, never the source. An angel has no light of its own any more than the moon does. Whatever radiance an angel possesses is borrowed light, received from the one true source, reflected back into the darkness. The angels shine because they receive. They are mirrors of a glory that is not theirs. And the name, remember the name, Sariel, the command of God, the Prince of God. The very name confesses it. He is not the command. He is the command of God. He is not a light. He is a reflection of the light of God. His whole being, his whole authority, his whole brilliance is a thing received and turned back, the way the moon receives the sun and turns it toward the night. The angel of the moon is in his very nature, what the moon is: a receiver of light, a reflector of a glory that flows from somewhere else. Now hold that beside the fall of the watchers, and feel how everything clicks into place. What was the sin of the watchers? In the end, beneath all its forms, it was the sin of the mirror that forgets it is a mirror. The sin of the moon that begins to imagine its light is its own. The watchers took the secrets of heaven and gave them away, as though those secrets were theirs to give. They took the bodies of women as though the boundaries of creation were theirs to cross. They acted as sources rather than as reflectors. They forgot that everything they had, every secret, every power, every gleam of glory, was borrowed light, received and held in trust, never owned, and in forgetting it, they fell. The light that is borrowed can be reflected faithfully into the dark, but the light that is borrowed cannot be possessed. The moment a created thing tries to grasp the borrowed light as its own, the light becomes a curse in its hands. This is why the same knowledge, the course of the moon, could be holy in Uriel's mouth and a crime in the catalogue of the fallen. When the knowledge is reflected, given as a gift from the source, through the angel to the worthy, it shines. It orders the worship of heaven. It keeps the appointed times. It heals. But when the knowledge is seized, grasped as a possession, dragged down and handed over by a being, acting as though it were the owner and not the steward, the very same knowledge corrupts. It becomes divination instead of devotion. It becomes power-seeking instead of worship. It becomes a tool for the creature to set itself up in the place of the source. The difference is never in the knowledge. The difference is always in the reflecting versus the grasping, in whether the light is received and passed on with open hands or seized and clutched as one's own. And is that not the oldest temptation in the world? It is the very temptation in the garden. The fruit was the knowledge of good and evil, and the knowledge was not evil. The serpent's promise was, "You shall be like God. You shall be a source. You shall no longer merely reflect the light. You shall hold it as your own." And the reaching for that, the grasping of the borrowed light as a possession, was the first fall. And every fall since has been a repetition of it. The watchers fell the same way Adam fell, by forgetting that the light was on loan. This is why the moon is the perfect emblem for the whole mystery, because the moon never forgets. The moon has kept the truth faithfully since the fourth day of creation. It shines gloriously with a borrowed light, and then, with perfect humility, it wanes. It gives back what it received. It empties. It darkens. It vanishes into the night, holding on to nothing, claiming nothing, owning nothing. And then it turns its dark face back toward the sun and receives the light again and waxes back to fullness and shines once more. Wax and wane, receive and release, fill and empty. The moon has never once tried to keep the light, and so the moon has never fallen. It has kept its course faithfully through every night of all the ages, the most faithful preacher in all the visible heavens of the truth that the watchers forgot. The light is not yours, it is loaned. Reflect it, and you will shine. Grasp it, and you will fall. This, in the end, may be the deepest reason that an angel of the moon was set in the book of Enoch over the spirits of human beings who sin in the spirit. For that is precisely where the grasping begins. Not in the body, not in the deed, but in the secret turning of the inner will, in the hidden moment when a soul stops reflecting and starts claiming, when it ceases to receive the light with gratitude and begins to clutch it as a possession. The sin in the spirit is the first dimming of the mirror. The moment the moon forgets, in the privacy of its own dark, that the light was never its own. And it is over exactly that threshold, the threshold of the inner night where the grasping begins, that the Prince of the Moon was set to keep his watch. You have a moon inside you. We all do. If you have lived any number of years at all, you know that the light within a person is not constant. There are seasons when you are full, when the warmth flows easily, when you feel near to what is good, when gratitude comes without effort and you reflect the light you have received as naturally as breathing. And there are other seasons. Seasons when the light wanes in you, when you grow thin and dim, when the warmth seems to drain away night by night until you can hardly find it at all. And there are nights, perhaps you have known them, when the inner moon goes utterly dark, when you cannot feel the light anywhere, when you turn your face toward where the source should be and find only the cold and the silence and the dark. The ancients understood that this inner waning was where the real danger lived, not in the great visible sins, the ones the whole world can see, but in the quiet dimming of the spirit, in the secret turning of the heart, in the privacy where no one else can follow. This is the region the book of Enoch gave into the keeping of Sariel, the spirits of human beings who sin in the spirit, the inner night, where the light fades and the grasping begins, in the dark, in the silence, where only the soul and God can go. It is worth asking gently why a guardian would be set over a place like that. Not a judge, not an executioner, a keeper, a watcher. The book does not say that Sariel punishes the sins of the spirit. It says he is set over them, given charge of that inner threshold, posted at the door of the human heart where the gravest falls begin. And a watchman is not set over a thing to destroy it. A watchman is set over a thing to keep it, to guard it, to wait in the dark for the turning. There is a strange comfort in that if you let yourself feel it. To imagine that the place in you where the light fades, the secret place of your dimming and your grasping and your worst inner nights, is not unwatched, is not abandoned. That a prince of the presence, the angel of the moon, the keeper of the rhythm of waxing and waning, stands at the threshold of exactly that darkness, not to condemn it, but to keep watch over it, to remember, even when you cannot, that the dark of the moon is not the death of the moon, that what wanes will wax again, that the light, when it returns, will return from the source, freely given, asking only to be received. For this is the final lesson the moon has to teach, and it is the lesson the inner night most needs to hear. The dark of the moon is not failure. It is not the end. It is part of the course. The moon was made to wane as surely as it was made to wax. The emptying is not a betrayal of the light. It is the necessary turning that makes room for the light to be received anew. And so the dark seasons of the spirit, the nights when the warmth drains away and you cannot feel the good anywhere, these too may be part of a course, part of a rhythm older than your understanding. The waning that comes before the waxing, the emptying that makes room, the dark of the moon that is not its death, the one whose name means the command of God keeps watch over your inner night, and the command he reflects, the law he keeps, the order he guards, is the same law the moon obeys, that the light always returns, that the darkness is never the last word, that after the dark of the moon, the thin curve of returning silver always appears again in the western sky. There is one last turn to this story, and it is the strangest of all, because it happened not in the heavens, but in the long memory of the human race. The name Sariel itself, across the centuries, did exactly what the moon does. It waxed, and then it waned, and now, perhaps, it is waxing again. In the earliest layers we can reach, Sariel stood among the very highest. One of the 4 great archangels of the war scroll, his name carved where it would be carried into the final battle. One of the 7 holy ones in the book of Enoch, sent, in the oldest fragments, on the gravest missions of judgment and rescue. In that ancient dawn, his light was at the full. And then, slowly, it waned. As the centuries passed, and the traditions were copied and recopied. The role that once belonged to Sariel was, in many texts, given over to Uriel, the angel of the light of God. "Where the old fragments," said Sariel. "The later manuscripts," said Uriel. The four great names that everyone would come to know settled into Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, and Sariel slipped quietly from the front rank, eclipsed, moved toward the margins. By the time the great religious traditions of the West had taken their familiar shape, his name had grown dim. Most people had never heard it. He had become a figure for scholars and mystics and the writers of obscure angel lists. The Prince of the Moon had himself gone into the dark of the moon, faded from the bright center of memory into the shadowed edge. And the book that remembered him best, the Book of Enoch, faded with him. In the West, it was set aside, left out of the canon, its copies grown so scarce that for more than 1,000 years it survived in Europe, only as a rumor, a few quotations, the ghost of a lost scripture. The world forgot the book, and forgot the moon's prince along with it, and the silver name went down below the horizon, out of sight, as if it had set forever. But the moon always returns. And so, against all likelihood, did the name. In the 1770s, a Scottish traveller named James Bruce journeyed into the highlands of Ethiopia, into the one place on earth where the Book of Enoch had been kept whole and holy all along, copied and treasured in the ancient tongue of the Ethiopian church, while the rest of the world forgot it, and he carried copies of it back to Europe. After more than 1,000 years of darkness, the lost book rose again into the light of Western eyes. In the 1820s, the first full English translation appeared, and slowly the strange and shining world of Enoch, the Watchers, the Seven Holy Ones, the gates of the sun and the courses of the moon, came back into the awareness of a world that had forgotten it ever existed. And then, in 1947, came the caves. The shepherd, the broken jar, the scrolls sealed in the rock above the Dead Sea for nearly 2,000 years. And among those scrolls, in the oldest fragments of all, written in Aramaic, were pieces of the Book of Enoch, far more ancient than the Ethiopic copies. Fragments that let scholars peer back behind the centuries of copying to something close to the original. And it was in those fragments, studied painstakingly across the decades that followed, that the oldest face of Sariel came back into view, the places where he, and not Uriel, was named, the evidence that he had once stood among the highest four, the recovery of a prince who had been waning in human memory for 2,000 years. Do you see what happened? The angel of the moon waned across the long night of forgetting, down into the dark, until his name had all but vanished from the sky of human memory. And then, slowly, in the rediscovery of his book and the unsealing of the desert caves, he began to wax again, to rise again, to return into the light, the thin returning curve of a name remembered after a long and seemingly final dark. The moon's prince has kept the moon's own course, even in the memory of mankind, full in the beginning, dark through the long centuries, and rising again now, in our own age, as the lost book is read once more and the forgotten name is spoken again in the night, which is, in a sense, what we have done tonight. We have spoken the name again. We have turned our faces toward a thing that had nearly vanished, and let a little of its borrowed light fall on us once more. And in doing so we have become, for a few quiet hours, watchers ourselves, keepers of a memory that very nearly went dark forever. So we come, at the last, to the question that all of this has been circling, the way the moon circles the dark and patient earth. What does any of it ask of us? Not of scholars, not of the ancient scribes bent over their fragile scrolls, but of us, here, now, in the ordinary dark of our own rooms, with our own unfinished lives and our own quiet fears waiting for us in the morning. Why should the story of a half-forgotten angel and the silver light he was given to guard mean anything at all to a tired soul trying to find rest? The answer, I think, is hidden in the very thing that made his story tremble on the edge between glory and ruin. The moon gives light, but the light is not its own, and neither is yours. Think for a moment about everything in your life that shines. The love you have been given, the strength you carry, the small talents that set you apart, the kindness that flows out of you on your better days, the wisdom you have gathered from your own long nights. Every bit of it came to you. You did not manufacture the love out of nothing. You did not forge your own soul in a furnace of your own making. You woke, one day long ago, into a life you did not ask for and could not have invented, already lit, already warmed, already shining with a light that had been traveling toward you since before you drew your first breath. You are, in the deepest sense, a reflector, a surface turned toward a source, a moon. And there is no shame in this. This is the great secret the angel's story holds out to anyone willing to receive it. To be a reflector is not to be a lesser thing. The moon is not a failed sun. It was never meant to burn. It was meant to do something the sun cannot do. To walk the night beside the sleepless and the grieving. To give a light soft enough to bear, gentle enough to rest beneath. The whole beauty of the moon lies precisely in the fact that its light is borrowed. That is what makes it tender. That is what makes it kind. The fall, when it came, was never about being a reflector. The fall was about forgetting. It was the mirror turning to admire itself and mistaking the light upon its face for a fire burning within. It was the surface saying, "This brightness is mine. I made it. I own it. I owe it to no one." And in that single turning, that subtle and almost invisible swivel of the heart away from the source and toward the self, the light did not grow. It curdled. The same knowledge that could have been a gift became a theft. The same brightness that could have blessed the night became a thing that frightened it. And here is the quiet test that the moon lays before each of us every single night if we have eyes to see it. When something good shines out of you, where do you turn your face? Toward yourself, to gather the praise and hoard the glory and call the light your own, or back toward the source, in gratitude, in the deep and steadying knowledge that you are a vessel and not a fountain, a window and not the sun? This is not a small question. It is perhaps the whole question, because the soul that knows it shines with a borrowed light is a soul at peace. It does not have to defend its brightness, because the brightness was never its possession to lose. It does not have to fear the dark, because it knows that even when its own face goes black, the source has not gone out, and the light will return on its appointed day. It does not have to claw and grasp and seize, because it understands in its bones that everything it truly needs has already been given and goes on being given freely in the night. But the soul that has forgotten, the soul that believes its light is its own, lives in a low and constant terror. It must guard what it thinks it owns. It must envy the brightness of others. It must seize and hoard and prove again and again that the fire is real and that it belongs to no one else. That soul can stand in a flood of borrowed glory and feel only the gnawing fear of losing it. That soul, surrounded by gift, can starve. The watchers in the old and tragic story were the ones who forgot. They looked at the knowledge they had been entrusted with, the courses of the moon, the secrets of the sky, the deep workings of the world, and instead of holding it as a sacred trust to be opened in its proper time, they seized it and flung it down to a world not ready to receive it. And they did it to be admired, to be worshipped, to be like gods. They grasped the borrowed light and called it their own. And the gift in their grasping hands became a womb. You and I are not watchers. We will not teach forbidden secrets to the world or father giants upon the earth. Our temptations are smaller and far more ordinary, but they rhyme with that ancient fall, every one of them. The quiet pride that takes full credit for a thing we were only given the grace to do. The bitterness that resents another's gift instead of rejoicing in it. The exhaustion of forever trying to be a sun, of straining to generate from within, a light that was only ever meant to be received from beyond. How many of us are tired tonight? Not because we have given too much, but because we have been trying to shine with a light we thought we had to make ourselves. Lay it down. That is what the moon's prince, in the deepest and kindest reading of his story, would have us hear. Lay down the impossible labor of being your own source. You were never meant to carry it. You are not the sun, and you were never asked to be. You are something gentler and, in its own way, more beautiful. You are the thing that takes a light too great to look upon and turns it soft and carries it into the dark places and lays it down like silver over the sleeping and the sorrowing and the small. There is a rest that comes only to those who remember this. It is the rest of the moon, which does not strain to rise, but is lifted, which does not manufacture its glow, but simply turns its worn and cratered face toward the light, and lets that be enough. It asks nothing of itself that it was not given the power to do. It keeps its course, it trusts the dawn, and in the keeping and the trusting, it becomes, night after night, the most faithful and consoling light in all the sky. So when you lie awake tonight, and the old fears come, the ones that whisper that you are not enough, that your light is failing, that you must do more and be more and prove more before you are allowed to rest, remember the moon. Remember that you are a reflector, and that this is not your shame but your peace. Remember that the source has not gone out. Remember that even in your darkest phase, when no light at all seems to reach your face, the dawn is still coming, on its appointed day, exactly as it always has. You do not have to make the morning. You only have to wait for it. And waiting, trusting, resting in a light you did not earn and cannot lose, is the oldest and truest form of faith there is. This is what the moon asks of us. Not that we burn, only that we remember whose light we carry and turn our faces toward it and let it be enough to rest beneath. So let us gather it all together now, gently, as the night grows deep and the hour grows late, and lay it down to rest. We began by looking up at the moon, at that pale and faithful light that has kept its course over every roof and every sea and every sleeping town since long before there were names for the months. And we asked about the one the ancients believed was set to keep it. The prince whose name means the command of God, Sariel. We found him on the war banners of a desert people, one of the 4 great commanders whose names were meant to be carried into the final battle of light against the dark. We found him among the 7 holy ones in the book of Enoch, set over the most intimate and most dangerous region of all creation, the secret sins of the human spirit. We found him sent on missions of judgment and rescue in the oldest fragments ever recovered. And we found his name, troublingly, in the catalogue of the fallen, among the watchers who came down upon the mountain and broke the boundary of heaven and taught humankind the course of the moon. We could not finally decide whether the Holy Prince fell, or whether his name was borrowed for a fallen brother, or whether his treasure was simply stolen out of his keeping. The ancient texts would not give us that certainty, and we did not pretend to a knowledge we do not have. But we found that every reading led to the same deep center, the moon and its course, and the question of who has the right to keep it, the question of knowledge that heals when it is received as a gift, and wounds when it is seized as a possession. We followed the name into the gentler texts, where he becomes the Prince of the Presence, the guardian who whispers protection to the living, the healer, and the solemn keeper of the final threshold. And we found that all his many faces were held together by a single thread, the moon, time and its keeping, the rhythm of waxing and waning, the boundary between the light and the dark, and the law that governs the crossing of it. We saw why the course of the moon was knowledge worth fighting over, because the moon keeps the calendar, and the calendar keeps the appointed times, and the appointed times are the meeting place between heaven and earth. To keep the moon's course is to keep the most sacred clock there is. And we came, at the last, to the deepest truth of all, that the moon shines with no light of its own, that all its glory is borrowed light, received from the sun and reflected into the night, and that this is the nature of every created thing, every angel, every soul, including yours. We are mirrors. Our beauty is real, but it is not our own. We shine only because we receive. And the whole tragedy of the fall, in the garden and on the mountain alike, was the tragedy of the mirror that forgot it was a mirror, the moon that tried to keep the light as its own. The light that is borrowed can be reflected faithfully and made to shine across the whole dark world, but it cannot be possessed. The moment we grasp it, it turns to a curse in our hands. The moon never forgot this. Through every night of all the ages it has shone with a borrowed glory, and then, with perfect humility, given it back, waxing and waning, receiving and releasing, filling and emptying, holding onto nothing, claiming nothing, owning nothing. And so the moon has never fallen, but keeps its faithful course still, the truest preacher in all the visible heavens of the lesson the watchers forgot. So when the night settles fully around you now, and the day's grasping loosens its hold, and you feel yourself begin to drift down toward sleep, let this be the thought that goes down with you into the dark. The light was never yours to keep. It was given, freely, to be received with open hands and reflected back into the night, and then released, and then received again. You do not have to hold it. You were never meant to hold it. You were meant only to turn your face toward the source, the way the dark face of the moon turns toward the sun, and let the light fall on you, and let it shine through you while it shines, and then, when the waning comes, to let it go in peace, trusting the course, trusting that the dark of the moon is not the death of the moon, that after the darkness, the thin returning silver always appears again in the western sky, that what wanes will wax, that the light always comes back. And if there is an inner night in you tonight, a place where the warmth has drained away and you cannot feel the good anywhere, remember that even that dark place is watched over, that a keeper stands at its threshold, not to condemn the darkness, but to wait with you in it, and to remember, even when you cannot, that the light is on its way back. The one whose name means the command of God keeps the law that the moon obeys. And the law is this: the darkness is never the last word. The Prince of the Moon kept his course through the heavens and waned in the long memory of mankind, and is rising again, even now, in the speaking of his name. The moon outside your window is doing the same, this very night, holding its borrowed light over the sleeping world and asking to keep nothing. So rest. Let the light fall on you, and let it go. Turn your tired face toward the source, and receive what is given, and ask to hold nothing. The moon keeps its faithful watch over the dark, and the light, the borrowed and beautiful light, will always, always return. Sleep well. The course is being kept, and the dawn is already on its way.